Everybody, welcome back to another review, and this time we're talking about more Transformers from the IDW collection. We're on Volume 3, and this time we're talking about the 4-issue crossover between the Transformers and the New Avengers. Although, interestingly and very disappointingly, it's not written by Bendis, who was writing New Avengers, and it's not written by Simon Furman, who was writing Transformers. It's instead written by Stuart Moore, who's mostly been doing these spotlight issues. Which just inherently makes this gimmick less fun. It'd be one thing if you got to see Bendis write Optimus Prime, or it'd be more interesting to see if you got to see Simon Furman write Iron Man. But no, it's just Stuart Moore, and that kills the interest for me. But anyway, so this is a 4-issue mini, and the whole idea behind this on the IDW side is that it's supposed to be in this, what they call the semi-continuity, which means they're not going to do anything to pick up on it, but they're also not going to do anything to contradict it. And then on the Marvel side, they're like, no, it's not in canon, just screw it. It's a fun story we did, but it's not in canon, because 616 doesn't work that way. Which is fine for Marvel. I feel like the semi-continuity thing for IDW, though, is much harder to keep, because in order for you to say, we're not going to do anything to contradict it, you have to, because Transformers is a series that's built on so many minor connections, like Spotlight Optimus Prime has a distress call that we get to see picked up on in Spotlight Wheelie, like that kind of thing. It's built on so many small bits of continuity and points of interest and stuff that you can't just read something that's supposed to be in canon and then act like it's not. Like, for example, the Transformers go all over the country with this series. So if they're not going to contradict the fact that they live in the Marvel Universe, then at some point something like S.H.I.E.L.D. needs to show up, or another superhero, or something. I don't know, it's weird, I can't get past that. I wish IDW would have just came out and said it's not in continuity, because there's no way it can be. But that small tangent aside, essentially what we have here is that it's a story that takes place between the first 2 arcs of the New Avengers, and somewhere between Stormbringer and Escalation, or more accurately, Infiltration and Escalation. Some of the stuff that happens in Escalation is referenced here. Some of the stuff that happens in Spotlights later is referenced here. For example, Spotlight Ramjet was in the previous collection, and the setup for Spotlight Ramjet is actually here, where he shows up and he's taking orders from Megatron, but he clearly has his own plans and his own agenda, and he lets the Avengers do what they want because he wants to deal a blow to Megatron. So that kind of setup is here, even though we read that issue earlier. So the basic premise behind this is there's a war brewing between Latveria and another neighboring country. And so the Avengers are going in to try and stop Doctor Doom from launching this war. But when they get there, they see this giant structure, and in trying to break into it, they start to get more and more irritated with each other. And you find out that there is this thing called an aggression wave that Megatron has been using to kind of goad both sides into a war, and so Doctor Doom doesn't want to be a pawn in this. And so when the Avengers break in, they're all being scanned until they find Spider-Man, whose DNA is somehow able to operate like Ultra Energon and power up the Transformers. So they capture Spider-Man. In the meantime, Captain America, Luke Cage, and Wolverine, those are the other Avengers we get here, and Captain Marvel, Iron Man show up later, are fighting amongst themselves until the Transformers show up and like put on inhibiting chips on them, so the aggression wave isn't affecting them. And I have a stupid smile on my face because this is just really stupid. I'm going to try and explain this as best I can, but it's really stupid. So the Transformers and the Avengers then team up But before they can really get anywhere, we have Captain Marvel show up, or Miss Marvel at this point, who's completely lost it on the aggression wave, and they calm her down. And then Doctor Doom shows up, and Doctor Doom's like, I'm not going to be made a fool of by these Decepticons. And so they all go off, and they're going to attack the Decepticons. And their big firepower against the Decepticons to stop this war is Iron Man, who has a giant Transformers-sized armor because he's been tracking them the whole time. I don't even... It's... He's just got a giant, ready-to-go suit of battle armor that's just a giant extremis suit, and it's hilarious. So he shows up, and he's going to be like their main firepower against the Decepticons, while the Decepticons are using Spider-Man's blood to become Super Saiyans or whatever. It's ridiculous, I know. And then... and so all of that's happening. We have one of those kooky comic book scenes of, the Transformers are going to link up with Iron Man in order to make him more powerful. We have a lot of scenes with just the Avengers and the Transformers beating people up together, beating up Decepticons together, fighting robots together and stuff. And the whole 4-issue story, the whole idea is built around this premise that if we don't stop this brewing war between Latvia and this neighboring nation in 24 hours, it's going to happen. So you have a 24-hour window. And so this whole story, you're just progressively getting lower and lower and lower. And it gets really dumb, because at the end of issue 2, they're like, we only have 12 hours left, and then cliffhanger. And then the very next issue that opens like a second after that scene, it says 5 hours left. So even the sliding timeline of this is really dumb. So the new Avengers, Transformers, Iron Man, and the Autobots attack the Decepticons, who are powered up on spider blood, radioactive spider blood, to become Super Saiyans, and are trying to beat the crap out of each other. That's this story. If you could call it a story. That's what this is. I don't even know what to say. It's not very good. There's nothing, like, inherently thematically interesting going on here. We're not dealing... Okay, it's trying to deal with this idea of war and conflict, which is what the Transformers comics always have been about. All of the Transformers comics we've talked about so far have been about anti-war messages, the toll of war, the cost, the personal cost of war, the psychological effects of war, and so the aggression wave is meant to kind of symbolize some of that, and then still be in line with the infiltration idea of the Decepticons, who are goading the planet into conflict, although then it raises the question of, why even bother with the facsimiles if you can just plant a whole bunch of aggression waves all over the place? So you've got like this monologue from Captain America throughout the whole book, where he's like, the engines of war, the gears of war keep turning, and by the end of it, it's more about him like being able to let go of the war mentality. But there's no character arc. It's just a bunch of narration that's trying to make this story seem deeper than it actually is. And there's lots of moments here and there where the Autobots and the Avengers are kind of relating to each other to degrees, but it's not built on any like interesting character trait or interesting shared life experience. It's more so just quirky personality meets quirky personality. And the whole gimmick of this is just, Marvel used to have a license to Transformers comics, IDW has it now. What if the Transformers and Avengers just showed up together on panel? And I feel like this story is written for children or very, very base level readers. The whole point of this story is just to get you wish fulfillment. Oh my god, fanboy out, Transformers and Avengers together kind of thing. There's nothing of substance here whatsoever, and it's a very stark contrast to what New Avengers was at the time and what the Transformers comics are. It's not like either of them, and it's smashing them together. And Stuart Moore, who we've read beforehand, who does have a voice for these characters, has absolutely no voice for anyone in this story, and has absolutely no voice for any of the Avengers. In the first issue, I wrote it off as just, okay, aggression wave, they're not behaving like themselves, but even after that, they aren't written like the Avengers. They aren't really written like people. It feels so stock and so generic, and that the only reason that this was published is so you could get a fanfic transformed into a comic published by a real company. There's nothing about it that's necessarily very good. There's nothing about it that's really worth reading. In fact, what you're thinking of in your mind as Transformers Avengers crossovers, and actually some of the stuff we did back in the old Marvel days, is a lot better than anything that's happening in here. This is just 4 issues of nothing with some really, really hilarious bits of stupid thrown in. Like, you saw me just cracking up while trying to talk about the alleged story of this thing. When Iron Man shows up out of nowhere, and he's like, and Captain America's like, so yeah, giant robots live among us, and Iron Man's like, oh yeah, totally, I'm the technology guy, I obviously knew that this was happening the whole time, so I prepared a giant robot. I mean, and to be fair, Tony Stark, particularly post-extremis Tony Stark, is the kind of guy that would just build a giant robot. But it's just written so dumbly, as if he knew about the Transformers and his plan to take out the Transformers was to build a giant robot. A giant robot whose kinks have not been worked out, so every time he blasts like a single repulsor, his power goes down by like 10%. And it's really amusing just watching the lowering power percentage of him as he's fighting the Decepticons. It's really funny. Seeing Iron Man punch out Megatron is kind of fun, but again, very base level. It feels like the most generic fanboy thing you could think of. They didn't even attempt to do anything interesting with the Avengers and Transformers having any sort of interactions. Captain America and Optimus Prime alone have millions of things in common. You could do a whole bunch of really interesting things with Prowl and Iron Man. You could do a ton of interesting things with someone like Hot Rod and Wolverine. And you do nothing here. You don't do anything of substance or of interest or to build on anything that's just naturally there. So, New Avengers Transformers is not very good. If you do end up buying this collection, just skip it entirely. Some of the art's alright. If you want to see giant robot Iron Man beat up Super Saiyan Megatron, that is, go for it. But there's nothing to read. There's nothing to interpret or understand or do anything interesting with. It's just a bunch of wasted potential all over the place. And the only thing redeeming about it is that the art's really good. So yeah, that's New Avengers Transformers. Let me know what you think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said. If you read this story, let me know what you think. And I'll be back with another review next time.